Hello, everyone, and welcome back to English in Advance. It's me, your host, Jennifer, and I am absolutely delighted to be with you again today. As you know, our mission on this channel is to help you move forward, to advance your English skills so you can use them with confidence in the real world. Today's episode is a deep, immersive dive into a topic that is arguably the most important skill for any language learner: conversational English. This isn't just about sounding correct, it's about sounding natural, about connecting with people, and about feeling comfortable and confident in any social situation. So, I want you to get settled, maybe with a cup of tea or coffee, and let's spend some time together. This is going to be a comprehensive journey, a continuous, human like conversation where we'll integrate all the explanations, examples, and practice prompts directly into our chat, making it perfect for your listening practice. We're going to build your conversational skills from the ground up, focusing specifically on what B1 and B2 level learners need to know to take that next big leap. Our journey begins with what might seem like a simple concept, but it is the absolute bedrock of all effective communication: the art of active listening. Now, I can already imagine some of you thinking, but Jennifer, I am here to learn how to speak. And that's a completely understandable thought. But I want to challenge you on that. Speaking and listening are not separate skills. They are two sides of the same coin. You cannot have a great conversation if you are not a great listener. Think of listening as the foundation of a house. Without a strong foundation, the house can't stand. Without strong listening, your conversation will fall flat. Active listening is about more than just hearing the words. It's about processing them, understanding the emotion behind them, and picking up on the subtle cues that tell you what the person is really trying to say. So, how do we do it? Instead of simply waiting for your turn to speak, you must focus your full attention on the person talking. Try to listen for the key details, the main ideas, and the feeling behind their voice. Are they excited? Frustrated? Worried? These details inform your response and show that you are truly engaged. For instance, imagine a colleague comes to you and says, "I was up all night trying to finish the report, and then this morning my computer crashed just as I was about to save the final changes." A passive listener might just say, "That's a shame." That's a correct response, but it doesn't show much engagement. An active listener, however, would pick up on those specific, important details. A better response would be something like, "Oh no, that sounds incredibly frustrating. Did you lose all your work on the report? That must have been awful." Do you see the difference? The second response acknowledges their frustration, asks a specific follow-up question, and shows genuine empathy. It's a conversation starter, not a conversation ender. Let's try a little practice right now. I'm going to tell you a short story, and I want you to listen intently. Focus not just on the events, but on the feelings I might be expressing. Here's my story. I went on a long road trip this weekend with my family. Everything was going great. We were singing along to music and the sun was shining. But then, about an hour from our destination, we got a flat tire. It was a huge hassle to change it on the side of the road, and by the time we arrived, we were all a little grumpy and just wanted to relax. Now, I want you to think about what you would say in response. What questions would you ask that show you were truly listening? Would you ask about the mood in the car after the tire incident? Maybe something like, "That's such a pain. Did it put a damper on the whole trip?" Or perhaps you might ask for more specific detail, like, a flat tire is the worst. Were you able to get the tire fixed quickly? Both of those responses go beyond a simple, that's too bad, and show a deeper level of engagement. They're built on the information I provided and demonstrate that you are an active, not passive participant in our conversation. Moving on from listening, our next big topic is about the natural flow and rhythm of speech. We're going to talk about something that can feel very strange at first: conversational fillers and hesitation markers. In formal English class, you're often taught to speak without these pauses, to have perfect, uninterrupted sentences. But in reality, in any language, this is not how people talk. Think about it. When you speak your native language, you don't have an immediate, flawless answer for every question. Sometimes you need a moment to think, to remember a word, or to decide how to phrase something. We use words and phrases like uh, well, so, you know, I mean, and like to fill these natural pauses. Using these fillers doesn't make you sound hesitant or unsure. It makes you sound human and natural. They give your brain a moment to catch up and signal to your conversation partner that you're not finished speaking yet. These fillers serve different purposes. A simple or is often a pure hesitation marker. When someone asks you a tricky question, you might start your response with, that's a good question. Um, I guess I would say that. On the other hand, a filler like well or so often introduces a thought or a new point. You might say, well, I think the main issue is, or so what I was trying to say was. The phrase you know is often used to assume shared knowledge or to soften a statement, as in, it was a really long day, you know? And the very common I mean is often used to clarify or rephrase something you've just said. It was a difficult test. I mean, the questions were just so specific. Let's try a more detailed practice this time. I'm going to ask you a question that requires a bit of thought, and I want you to intentionally use one or two of these fillers as you formulate your response. Don't rush. Just let your thoughts flow and add in a well, or an I mean, or a you know when it feels right. The question is, what's a hobby you've always wanted to try? And what do you think would be the most challenging part of it? Now take a moment to think. You might start your answer with, well, let me think. And as you get into your explanation, you could say something like, I've always wanted to try playing the guitar, you know. I mean, I love music, so it seems like a natural thing to do. But I guess the most challenging part would be the discipline of practicing every day. Do you hear how those small additions make the whole response sound less like a memorized script and more like a real-time thought process? This is a skill you should practice in your head all the time, making your English feel more and more natural. Now that we have the rhythm of speech down, let's talk about the words themselves. The next piece of the puzzle is mastering idiomatic expressions and phrasal verbs. This is where English can start to feel a bit more colorful and, admittedly, a bit tricky. Idioms are phrases where the meaning isn't obvious from the individual words, like kick the bucket for to die, or break a leg for good luck. Phrasal verbs are combinations of a verb and a preposition or adverb that create a new meaning, like put off for to delay, get by for to survive with just enough, or look up to for to admire. These are incredibly common in spoken English, and using them correctly will make a huge difference in how natural you sound. Let's explore a few more to really get a feel for them. A very common phrasal verb is come across. It can mean to find something by chance, as in, I was cleaning out my closet and I came across some old photos. Or it can mean to be perceived in a certain way. Like he came across as a very confident and friendly person. You can see how the context gives it a different meaning. Another great one is fall through, which means to fail to happen. For example, we were going to have a picnic, but our plans fell through because of the rain. Let's practice this. I'll give you a simple, non idiomatic sentence, and I want you to rephrase it using one of these conversational phrases. For instance, if I said, I admire my older sister, you could say, I really look up to my older sister. It has the same meaning, but sounds more natural and conversational. Now it's your turn. What if I said, I met an old friend by chance at the supermarket yesterday? How could you rephrase that using the phrasal verb we just discussed? A great response would be, I came across an old friend at the supermarket yesterday. And one more. If I said, we had an idea for a business, but it didn't succeed, how would you rephrase that using a phrasal verb? The perfect answer would be, we had an idea for a business, but it fell through. This kind of mental exercise is so valuable. The more you do it, the more these phrases will become second nature to you. Now let's get personal and talk about how we share our internal world with others. The next topic is expressing opinions and feelings. A conversation is a two-way street, and we need to be able to tell people what we think and how we feel. However, we often do this with more nuance than a simple I like it or I don't like it. We use language to either soften our opinion or to make it sound more certain and emphatic. This is a very important part of social grace. To express a strong, confident opinion, you can use phrases like, I honestly believe that, or, in my opinion, the best way to do this is, or, I'm convinced that. For example, I honestly believe that everyone should learn a second language. This shows you're not just guessing, you have a strong conviction. But what if you're not so sure? What if you want to be more polite or less assertive? This is where softening phrases come in. You could say, I tend to think that, or it seems to me that, or I guess I would say. These phrases give you space and make your opinion feel like a suggestion rather than a command. For instance, I tend to think that the new policy might have some unintended consequences. This is much softer than the new policy is a bad idea. Let's try a more expansive practice. I want you to think about a recent news story you've heard or a movie you've watched. First, formulate a sentence expressing a strong, certain opinion about it. For example, I'm convinced that the special effects in that movie were the best I've ever seen. Now take that same thought and try to rephrase it using a more cautious, softened approach. You could say, I guess I would say that the special effects in that movie were very impressive. Or perhaps, it seems to me that the special effects were quite good, but I'm not sure if they were the best. Do you hear how each phrase changes the tone? Being able to master this range of expression will allow you to navigate all sorts of conversations, from casual chats with friends to more serious discussions. A huge part of conversational English is sharing what's happened to us. This brings us to the art of storytelling. Conversations are often a series of mini stories we tell each other about our day, our past experiences, or something funny that we saw. Being able to tell a story well is a powerful way to engage a listener. A good story has a beginning, a middle, and an end, but it also uses specific phrases to guide the listener through the narrative. We call these phrases signposts. To begin a story, we often use phrases like, so the other day, or you won't believe what happened, or a funny thing happened to me recently. To move the story along and build suspense, we can use phrases like, and then all of a sudden, or suddenly out of nowhere, or believe it or not. And to wrap things up and get to the main point, we use phrases like long story short, or in the end, or so that's how I ended up. These phrases are like signposts on a road trip, telling the listener where the story is headed and helping them follow along. Imagine you're telling a friend about a mishap with your phone. A simple statement would be, my phone fell in the toilet. That's not a story. It's just a fact. A story would sound like this. So, the other day, I was at a cafe working on my laptop. I was just taking a quick break to go to the restroom when, all of a sudden, my phone slipped out of my pocket and splashed right into the toilet. Believe it or not, it was still on. Long story short, I was able to get it out, and it's still working, but I had to buy a new case for it. Can you hear the flow of the story? The signposts make it feel like a real narrative, not just a series of events. Now it's your turn. Think of a small, memorable event that happened to you this past week. It could be something surprising, funny, or even a little bit annoying. Try to tell that story out loud to yourself, using at least one of these signposting phrases. Start with something like a funny thing happened to me yesterday, and see if you can add a and then or a long story short to make it more engaging. This is a great way to practice connecting your thoughts into a coherent and interesting narrative. Every conversation, especially when you're learning a language, will have moments of confusion. So, a crucial part of conversational confidence is knowing how to handle misunderstandings and ask for clarification. There is absolutely no shame in asking someone to repeat themselves or to explain a word. In fact, it shows that you are actively engaged and determined to understand. There are many polite and effective ways to ask for help. A simple and direct approach is to say, I'm sorry, could you say that again? Or, could you repeat that, please? If you miss just one part of the sentence, you can be more specific and say, I didn't catch the last part of what you said. Or if a particular word is the problem, you could ask, what does word mean? A very useful phrase for checking your understanding without asking for a full repeat is, I think I understand, but just to be sure, are you saying that? This gives you a chance to confirm your interpretation and shows the other person you are trying to meet them halfway. Let's practice this. I'm going to say a sentence with a slightly unusual phrase, and I want you to respond with a polite clarification request. Here's what I'll say. I was so tired after work that I was just going to veg out on the couch all night. Now, what would you say to ask what veg out means? A perfect response would be something like, I'm not familiar with the term veg out. What does that mean? Or you could try to guess and confirm, saying, I think veg out means to relax and do nothing. Is that right? Both of those are excellent ways to handle a moment of confusion. Having these phrases ready to go in your mind will make you feel much more prepared for any conversation. Another powerful tool for keeping a conversation alive and showing interest is knowing how to ask open-ended questions. A closed-ended question is one that can be answered with a simple yes or no. For example, did you have a good weekend? A closed-ended question often brings a conversation to a quick halt. An open-ended question, however, requires a longer, more detailed response. Instead of, "Did you have a good weekend?" you could ask, "What did you get up to this weekend?" Or, "What was the best part of your weekend?" These questions invite a narrative and encourage the other person to share a story, which, as we just discussed, is the lifeblood of conversation. Let's try a few. I'll give you a closed-ended question, and I want you to rephrase it as an open-ended one. Here's the question: do you like to cook? How could you turn that into a question that would lead to a more interesting conversation? You could ask, "What's your favorite meal to cook?" Or, "What got you into cooking?" What about this one? "Is your new job interesting?" How would you make that an open-ended question? A great alternative would be, "What's the most interesting project you're working on right now?" Or, "What does a typical day at your new job look like?" By consistently practicing asking these kinds of questions, you will not only improve your own speaking skills, but you will become a much more engaging and enjoyable conversation partner. The next thing we need to talk about isn't about the words themselves, but about the sound of the words, tone, and intonation. This is where the true music of the language lies. A sentence can have a completely different meaning depending on how you say it. For example, the sentence, "He's at the office," can be a simple statement of fact. But if you say it with a rising intonation at the end, "He's at the office," it becomes a question, often one of disbelief. If you say it with heavy stress on the word he, it could imply a surprise that he specifically is at the office, perhaps because he's usually not. A perfect example is the word really. If I say it flatly, really, it just means yes or I understand. But if I say it with a rise in intonation, really, it expresses genuine surprise. If I say it with a low skeptical tone, really, it expresses doubt or even sarcasm. These small variations in pitch and stress are incredibly important for conveying emotion. Let's try a simple practice. I want you to say the sentence, "I can't believe it," in 3 different ways. First, say it with a tone of shock, as if you've just heard some incredibly surprising news. Second, say it with a tone of disappointment, as if you've just received bad news. And third, say it with a tone of sarcastic disbelief, as if someone just told you something completely unbelievable. Do you hear the difference in your own voice? Practicing these nuances will help you not only sound more natural, but also understand the emotions of others much better. This leads us directly to another key aspect of natural speech: connected speech and contractions. In everyday casual English, we almost never pronounce every word as a separate, isolated unit. Words often flow together, and we use contractions constantly. We don't say, "I am," "you are," or "we have." We say, "I'm," "you're," and "we've." We also blend words together. Going to becomes gonna, want to becomes wanna, got to becomes gotta. This isn't sloppy or lazy. It's simply the natural rhythm of spoken English. Think about the sentence, "I am going to get a cup of coffee." In a fast, natural conversation, that might come out as, "I'm going to get a cup of coffee," or "Did you eat yet?" becomes, "Did ya eat yet?" The more you listen to native speakers, the more you will notice these sound changes. Let's practice a few. I'll give you a full, non-contracted sentence, and I want you to say it out loud using contractions and connected speech. The sentence is, "What are you going to do?" In fast speech, how would that sound? It would probably come out something like, "What you gonna do?" Or what about, "I have to finish this work?" In natural speech, that becomes, I have to finish this work. It's okay if this feels strange at first. The goal is to start recognizing it and then to try and mimic it. It's the final layer that makes your English sound truly authentic. Finally, we need to touch on the often dreaded but completely essential skill of small talk. Small talk is the verbal equivalent of a handshake. It's not about having a deep conversation, it's about breaking the ice and building a connection. It's the social lubricant that helps us transition from strangers to acquaintances. Common topics for small talk include the weather, hobbies, work, or something about the shared environment you're in. The key is to keep it light, easy, and to ask simple questions that don't require a huge emotional investment. Imagine you're at an event and you want to talk to someone you don't know. You could start with, "The food here is great, isn't it?" Or, "It's a really nice venue. Is this your first time here?" These are low pressure questions that give the other person an easy way to respond. Another simple but effective approach is to make an observation like, "This weather is crazy today, isn't it?" This opens the door for a quick back and forth. Let's try a small practice. Imagine you're in a coffee shop and you want to start a very brief conversation with the barista or another customer. What would you say? You could comment on the coffee, "Wow, this coffee smells amazing." Or on the music, "I love this song that's playing. Do you know who it's by?" These are simple, positive, and non intrusive ways to begin a social interaction. So, as we bring our comprehensive journey to a close, let's take a moment to reflect on everything we've covered. We started with the foundation of active listening, which is the superpower of any great conversationalist. We then moved on to the natural rhythm and flow of speech, using fillers and hesitation markers to sound more human. We equipped ourselves with a rich lexical toolbox of idioms and phrasal verbs, the colorful phrases that make English so vibrant. We learned how to express our opinions and feelings with nuance, and we delved into the art of telling a story with signposting phrases. We also prepared ourselves for the unexpected by learning how to ask for clarification and how to keep a conversation going by using open ended questions. We even explored the subtle but powerful impact of tone and intonation and the importance of contractions and connected speech. And finally, we touched on the essential skill of small talk to connect with others. Each of these elements, when combined, helps you move from being an English learner to a confident, natural English speaker. This is a journey, not a destination. There is no such thing as perfect English, only effective English. So please be patient with yourself, embrace your mistakes as part of the learning process, and celebrate every small victory. The goal is not to be flawless. The goal is to be understood, to connect, and to feel confident in your ability to communicate. Your homework, if you choose to accept it, is simply to go out and try one of these things. Listen for a new phrasal verb in a movie. Intentionally use "well" or "I mean" in your next practice conversation. Ask one open ended question today. You have all the tools you need. It's now just a matter of putting them into practice. Thank you so much for joining me today. I genuinely hope this session has given you a fresh perspective on what it means to learn and use conversational English. It's a wonderful journey, and I'm so glad to be on it with you. Join me next time on English in Advance as we continue our quest to master this incredible language. Until then, take care and happy speaking.